close your eyes for a moment and think about what home is supposed to mean in America. Not luxury, not excess, just safety, stability, a place where rent doesn't quietly destroy your future. That simple American promise is now under more pressure than at any point in modern history. As we move through the mid-2020s, a silent crisis has settled into everyday life. It doesn't crash like the stock market. It doesn't scream like inflation headlines. It arrives once a month when rent is due. This is what millions of Americans are living inside right now. It's called the American rent trap. The rent trap isn't just about rent being high. It's about a system where housing costs rise year after year, while incomes barely move. And when that gap widens, something dangerous happens. People stop saving. They stop building wealth. They stop moving forward. Rent eats the paycheck, the emergency fund, the future. And suddenly, no matter how hard you work, the path upward feels blocked. That's the trap. This isn't exaggeration. This reality is backed by years of research from institutions like Harvard, the Federal Reserve, and national housing coalitions. Yes, the numbers are staggering. Millions of households paying far more than they can afford. A severe shortage of affordable homes. But the real story isn't in the data. It's in the lives behind it. The family choosing between rent and healthcare. The worker with 2 jobs and 0 savings. The renter doing everything right and still falling behind. This is bigger than housing. When rent becomes unaffordable, financial stability collapses. Wealth inequality explodes. Communities lose their roots. Right now, half of all U.S. renters are cost-burdened. The wealth gap between homeowners and renters has grown to over 40-1. Life milestones are delayed. Inequality deepens. Homelessness rises. Not because people failed, but because the system tightened. This crisis is reshaping America in real time. And you can't fix what you don't understand. You can't escape a trap if you don't know how it's built. This is the beginning. Because housing isn't just about a roof over your head. It's about dignity, security, and whether the American dream is still a promise or a privilege. Now, let's go deeper. To understand America's housing crisis, we have to stop treating it like a single problem with a single cause. This isn't just about rent going up. This isn't just about homes being expensive. What's unfolding right now is a complex ecosystem, a system where different groups are connected, often in conflict, where gains for some mean pressure for others. And that raises an uncomfortable question we don't ask often enough. Who is being squeezed the hardest, and who is quietly benefiting? At the center of this crisis are everyday Americans. Renters facing lease renewals that jump hundreds of dollars overnight, sometimes without warning. Living with the constant fear that one more increase could force a move, or worse. Homeowners, too, feel the strain. Property taxes rising, insurance premiums surging, maintenance costs climbing. Many are locked in, sitting on low-interest mortgages they can't afford to give up, even if their homes no longer fit their lives. Then come the landlords, a group often treated as one, but deeply divided. On one side, small, mom-and-pop landlords. 1 or 2 properties, rising insurance, higher repair costs, property taxes eating into margins. On the other, corporate landlords and institutional investors, backed by massive capital, able to spread risk, using data, scale, and leverage to dominate certain markets. Same housing market, very different power. Now consider real estate investors and developers. They decide what gets built and what doesn't. Luxury units generate higher returns. Affordable housing doesn't. So most new construction targets higher-income renters. Even as affordability collapses at the bottom, financial institutions sit quietly behind the scenes. Banks, mortgage lenders, government-backed entities, setting lending standards and interest rates, deciding who gets access to ownership and who stays renting. And finally, there's government. Federal programs provide subsidies. States influence housing laws. But local governments make the most critical decisions. They decide density. They decide what's allowed. And by blocking middle-density housing, they tighten the entire system. This isn't chaos. It's an interconnected machine, and it's under strain. While this crisis touches nearly everyone, it does not hit everyone equally. The most severe impact falls on extremely low-income renters, households earning 30% or less of their area's median income. The numbers here are staggering. Across the U.S., there's a shortage of more than 7 million affordable rental homes. For every 100 families who need one, only 35 affordable homes exist. Nearly 9 out of 10 are cost-burdened. 3 out of 4 spend more than half their income on housing. Imagine earning $20,000 a year, and more than $10,000 disappears into rent. That leaves less than $200 a week for food, transportation, healthcare, and everything else. That's not poor budgeting. That's a system with no margin for error. Move slightly up the ladder, and the pressure doesn't disappear. Low and middle-income families feel it too, especially young professionals. Student debt collides with rising home prices, while wages lag behind. Today, affording a median-priced home requires far more income than most under 35 households earn. The result? Delayed milestones, delayed stability, delayed wealth. Then there are essential workers: teachers, nurses, firefighters, retail employees, the people communities depend on, often priced out of those same communities. In many markets, a full-time minimum wage worker would need nearly 3 full-time jobs just to afford a modest rental. So people commute longer, or they leave, and entire areas feel the loss. Seniors face a quieter crisis: fixed incomes, rising rents, exploding insurance premiums, property taxes climbing rapidly. For seniors relying on basic assistance, affordable rent barely exists anywhere. Overlay all of this with racial and ethnic inequality, and the picture becomes even clearer. Black and Hispanic renters are far more likely to be cost-burdened, far more likely to be extremely low income, far less likely to own homes. The ownership gap hasn't closed. It has widened. Add people with disabilities. Add single caregivers, mostly women, juggling housing and childcare with unstable income. This crisis targets vulnerability. It compounds inequality. Now comes the hardest truth. While millions struggle to stay housed, some actors profit from scarcity. Large institutional investors thrive in tight markets. Limited supply plus high demand creates pricing power. Single-family homes, once entry points to ownership, are bought in bulk, converted into rentals, especially in fast-growing regions. Even when new housing is built, it's usually expensive. Lower-cost units disappear, demolished, upgraded beyond reach, or converted, while subsidies reach only a fraction of those who qualify. To be clear, not all property owners win. Small landlords often struggle. But the systemic trend is unmistakable. Housing has shifted from a place to live to a financial instrument. And when housing becomes an asset first, wealth flows upward, away from renters, away from stability, away from future opportunity. This crisis isn't accidental. It's structural. It's a system where risk concentrates at the bottom and rewards concentrate at the top. Understanding who wins and who loses isn't about blame. It's about clarity, because until we understand the players, we can't understand the game. Next, we ask the deeper question: how did this system evolve into a trap? If we want to fix America's housing crisis, we have to stop talking only about symptoms. High rent is a symptom. Housing stress is a symptom. Even homelessness is a symptom. The real disease underneath all of it is something deeper, more structural, and far harder to escape. It's called the rent trap. And once you fall into it, getting out becomes incredibly difficult, no matter how hard you work. The rent trap isn't just rent going up. It's a system where housing costs rise faster than wages, year after year, forcing households to pour more and more of their income into one basic need: shelter. And here's the key difference. This isn't temporary hardship. This is a self-reinforcing cycle. First, there's a shortage of housing, especially affordable housing. Too few homes, too many people who need them. That imbalance creates intense competition, which leads to the second step: rent inflation. Landlords raise prices because they can. Someone else is always waiting. Then comes the squeeze. Renters cut back on everything else: saving, healthcare, education, even food quality, just to stay housed. Savings disappear. Emergency funds vanish. And that leads to the most damaging part: block mobility. Without savings, renters can't buy homes. Without buying homes, they can't build equity. Without equity, they fall further behind homeowners every single year. That's how inequality hardens. Not suddenly, but permanently. The old rule, don't spend more than 30% of your income on housing, has effectively collapsed. By 2023, half of all U.S. renters were already above that line. More than 1 in 4 were spending over half their income just on housing. And this isn't just low-income households anymore. Middle-class renters, People earning $45,000 to $75,000 have seen cost burdens double since the early 2000s. The rent trap has moved upstream. This didn't happen overnight. The seeds were planted long ago. In the mid-2000s, housing prices began racing ahead of incomes. Easy credit, low rates, and speculation pushed prices higher, especially in the West and South. Then came 2008. The crash wiped out millions of homeowners and froze construction almost entirely. Builders disappeared. Projects were canceled. Skilled labor left the industry. And while prices fell briefly, something else happened quietly. We stopped building enough homes. That shortage never went away. In the 2010s, the economy recovered, but housing supply didn't keep up. Prices rose faster than wages again. Zoning laws blocked density. Not in my backyard became policy. Then came the pandemic, and everything accelerated. Remote work reshaped migration. People flooded into suburbs, Sun Belt cities, and smaller metros. Demand exploded. Ultra-low interest rates fueled a buying frenzy. Home prices jumped nearly $100,000 on average in just a few years. Then inflation hit. Construction costs soared. Insurance premiums exploded. Property taxes climbed. Those costs didn't disappear, they were passed straight to renters. Finally, interest rates surged. Homeowners with low mortgage rates stopped selling. Inventory vanished. Buyers were pushed back into rentals. Demand surged again. By 2024 and 2025, the numbers told the story clearly. Home prices up 60% since 2019. Half of renters cost-burdened. Homelessness rising sharply. The rent trap was fully set. One of the most overlooked causes of this crisis is something called the missing middle. These are housing types most Americans barely see anymore. Duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, small apartment buildings, accessory units, granny flats, and backyards. These homes used to be common, and they mattered because they were naturally more affordable. Shared walls, smaller units, lower land costs per home, perfect stepping stones. But today, vast areas of American cities legally ban them. Zoning laws allow only single-family homes or massive apartment complexes. Nothing in between. Developers, facing high land and construction costs, chase luxury units. Affordable homes don't pencil out. And the old idea that housing filters down over time? That's broken too. In high-demand cities, even old units get renovated and repriced upward. The result? While most new apartments rent for well over $1,600, the supply of homes under $1,000 has collapsed. The latter is missing its middle rungs. This crisis is national, but not evenly distributed. In the Sun Belt, cities like Phoenix, Atlanta, and Miami exploded with growth. Jobs and people arrived faster than housing. Prices doubled. Rents spiked. Affordable options vanished. In coastal metros, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, the crisis is entrenched. Land is scarce. Regulations are complex. Opposition to density is fierce. Affordability there isn't strained, it's shattered. Then there are emerging mid-sized cities, places like Austin, Nashville, Tampa. Once affordable, now overwhelmed. In Tampa, a two-bedroom rental that cost about $1,200 in 2019 now runs close to $2,000. A teacher earning $50,000 can lose nearly half their take-home pay to rent alone. These cities are catching up to the worst parts of the crisis, fast. The rent trap isn't accidental. It's the result of years of decisions layered on top of one another about zoning, finance, construction, and who housing is really built for. And once you see how the machine works, you start to understand why escaping it feels almost impossible. Which brings us to the final question. What does this crisis do to a society when it's left unchecked? And how do people respond? That's where we go next. By now, one thing should be clear. The housing crisis isn't just about rent. It isn't just about mortgages. And it definitely isn't just about the housing market. This crisis is reshaping how Americans live, plan, and imagine their future. When housing becomes unaffordable, the damage doesn't stop at the front door. It spreads, quietly, relentlessly, through finances, health, families, and entire communities. This is why the rent trap matters to everyone, even those who think they're safe from it. Let's start with the most immediate impact: financial stress. Housing is the biggest monthly expense for most households. When that cost becomes overwhelming, stress becomes permanent. For millions of families, after rent is paid, there's almost nothing left. That forces impossible trade-offs. People cut grocery budgets, not by choice, but by necessity. Doctor visits get postponed. Prescriptions are stretched. Education plans are delayed or abandoned altogether. When you're left with a few $100s a month after housing, life becomes a constant calculation. And that pressure doesn't stay financial. It turns psychological. Studies consistently show that housing instability is linked to higher anxiety, depression, and emergency psychiatric visits. The feeling of never catching up creates a quiet hopelessness that wears people down over time. Now zoom out. The most devastating long-term effect of the rent trap is wealth inequality. For generations, homeownership was the main way middle-class families built wealth. Not through luck, but through time, equity, stability,